Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Today, we are speaking to the authors and illustrator of The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight, Jennifer and Matthew Holm. Yeah, I really love The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight, and I love how proud Jennifer and Matthew are of this book. You know, I'm really proud of my first children's picture book, The Great Maratini. It tells the story of Sam, an aspiring and some say clumsy magician. Kids love the fact that he makes mistakes. They're hilarious mistakes, and kids really love it. Parents love the fact that Sam never gives up on himself, and because of that, he learns how to perform amazing tricks and transformations. Sam discovers, though, that the greatest transformation of all it doesn't take place on stage. It takes place in our hearts. It's transforming those feelings of caring into action to help another human being. I am so very, very proud, or as we say here in Boston, I'm wicked proud that The Great Maratini was named one of the top 7 books that teach kids kindness by childrenspublishing.com. It's also received Story Monster approval by Story Monster Inc. magazine. We hope it receives your family's approval too. You can read The Great Maratini for free via Kindle Unlimited at Amazon.com. Oh, I also want to let you know the only place that you'll be able to purchase a physical copy of The Great Maratini is at our next live event. And the next Reading with Your Kids live event is happening November 23rd and 24th. We're going to be part of the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, the greatest toy and game fair in North America. Like I said, it's happening November 23rd and 24th, Navy Pier in Chicago. Check this out. We're going to have a totally interactive booth where kids and families can find out what it feels like to be part of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Lots of those recordings that we'll be making at the fair will be part of future episodes of the show, and everybody who comes and takes part and gets a recording made will have that recording to keep forever. We're also going to be performing the Reading with Your Kids magic show live at the fair. We're going to have loads and loads of books on display and for sale at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And check this out. You can save $3 per ticket when you go to shytag.com. That's CHITAG.com, shytag.com, and use the promo code RWYK. That's our initials, Reading with Your Kids. RWYK. Save $3 per ticket, and there is no limit as to how many tickets you can purchase using that promo code. Come on out to Chicago's Navy Pier and be a part of the Reading with Your Kids totally interactive booth at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th. Join us right now from both sides of the country, Orange County, California, and north of New York City. It is the brother and sister battle to fun. Please welcome to the show the author and illustrator of The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight, Jennifer Holm, and her brother Matthew Holm. How are you folks?
Doing great.
Awesome.
I'm excited to have you back. Jennifer was on the show earlier, and folks absolutely loved her, and we're excited that brother and sister are here. It's fun. The book is really, really fun. I was telling both Jennifer and Matthew that my beautiful wife, when as soon as she saw the book, the preview copy came into the studio, she snatched it, and it is now in her classroom waiting to dazzle and entertain her students. But one of the things that really caught my eye and made me smile is instead of saying it was written by Jennifer and Matthew, it was, I forget exactly how it said, but it was Jennifer versus Matthew. I thought that was really
dueling siblings.
Dueling siblings. And that is what the book's kind of about. Can you tell us about the story, Jennifer?
Of course. So, Matt and I we've made about 50 books over the years. We've done the Baby Mouse series and the Squish series and the Sunny series in My First Comics. And regardless of whatever book we make, whenever we go to talk to children or educators or parents, the very first question out of their mouth is, what is it like to work with your brother? Or for Matt, what is it like to work with your sister? I mean, people are completely obsessed with the fact that we can work together and still talk to each other. And so Matt had drawn this great illustration of this kind of evil-looking princess a few years ago. And after somebody asked us again about what was it like working with your brother and sister, the idea of siblings, sharing a castle kind of started swirling in our head. And that was really the beginning of the evil princess versus the brave knight.
And there's so many things that I love about it. One of the things, of course, it just jumps out at you, Matthew. Your illustrations are beautiful. I mean, they're fun and they fit the story perfectly.
It was a lot of fun to go in sort of a different style this time. It's still very cartoony because that's really my forte. Mm-hmm. But most of my work is done digitally in the computer using a drawing tablet. So it's all the lines are a little like sort of computer smoothed and everything. And this one I tried to go as old school as I'm capable of. I did pencil lines for the outlines and watercolor for all the color washes, and then I use a computer to put it all together. So I still get the computer there to put it in. But it gave it a little bit more of a natural and a little more rambunctious maybe. I tried to keep as much, it's always fun, I think, when you see color, sort of going outside the lines and that kind of thing. So I tried to keep a little bit of those, imperfections in there whenever I happen upon them.
Well, and it is, and it's, I don't know if the word is accessible, but it's just fun, obviously they're very professional, but they're really, I think, kid friendly.
That's great. Yeah. It's funny. I used watercolor, in my work way back in high school, actually. I did some of my first cartoons with watercolor and ink, and then we got into Baby Mouse, which was just black and white and pink. And so I've been kind of out of the game for a while now. So it was fun to get back into that, and the sort of the chunkier, outline that the pencil gives it almost a crayon kind of feeling. And that definitely, I think, makes it feel accessible for kids. And the thing I always love about any sort of cartoon drawing is, even though they can be really hard to pull off, kids always feel like, hey, that looks like something that I could do, maybe. Mm-hmm. Versus like a super complicated oil painting or something.
Right. And I think that's what you want in a picture book. It's just fun, and I think kids can relate to it, and just embrace it and love it.
Yeah, and it was good to get the cartooning style lends it to all the energy that's in the story when the two characters are sort of pranking back and forth on each other.
And that's one of the things, Jennifer, that I really kind of tickled me is that I think, and I'm like almost 100 years old, so growing up, the stories were always about the evil brother that teasing the sister who was kind of like the angel, but the evil princess is pretty evil.
Yeah, I would say so. It might have been drawn a little bit from real life. I mean. I'm not confessing to anything, but, so we're 2 of 5 kids, and so we're very familiar with, sibling relationships, and I have 2 children of my own who are 4 years apart, and it's funny, it's something that's not really, kind of discussed a lot in books or picture books, like how kids interact, and, most of their lives, their interactions really, kind of form a core in their childhood. And I like that it's okay that kids are kids, that they play act at in a realistic way. You know, kids aren't always sweet with each other. They're, you know, she is playing a character. She's playing that she's evil. And it's kind of funny, but they're still ruled by the norms of society, which is their parental figure who is a magic mirror, who kind of squashes down on their fun a little bit. But yeah, we really just wanted to portray like a realistic, sibling, duo.
And yes, it was very realistic, and it reminded me a lot, not that my daughter or my son were evil in any way, but they had, you know, they grew up together. They were like 2.5 years apart, and you know, sometimes they just wanted to push each other's buttons.
Exactly, and they know how to push each other's buttons because they installed the buttons in each other.
That is perfect. What a perfect way to think about it. They did install the buttons on each other.
Yeah, and it was funny. So when we came out, I think another interesting thing that we learned was there really weren't a lot of books about siblings. I mean, maybe about 30 years ago there were some. So it seemed like a real hole in kind of the sort of the lexicon of children's books.
Now, have you received any feedback from parents or from kids going, "Yep, that's my kids right there"?
Well, it was funny. So we just presented it for the first time we were at the National Book Festival in Washington D.C. this past weekend, and it was this whole room of parents and kids, and the kids were hilarious. So we kind of did this thing where we said, we kind of asked them to repeat the line that the evil princess says. And so whenever she does something evil, like just trip her brother, for instance, she's completely not apologetic. She just says, that's what an evil princess does, you know, like I'm playing my part. And so we had, the kids, you know, recite that line if they were evil princesses, or if they felt they were more of a brave knight to, recite the brave knight's line. But it seemed like there were an awful lot of evil princesses in the audience. Many of them boys as well, I would say. So I feel like she's the character everybody is connecting with at the moment.
Wow, finding evil in Washington, D.C. Who would have thunk it?
Nice.
And that's as political as we'll get. Matthew, a lot of times illustrators tell me, you know, they typically will have very, very little contact with their authors. You know, they're hired by the publishing company, and they just get a story, and they do their own thing, and oftentimes the publishers keep the contact limited so as not to you know, influence the illustrator, and to let the illustrator, you know, create their own part of the story. That's not happening in this case, I'm imagining. I'm guessing there's a lot of feedback back and forth as the book is being created.
Yeah, definitely. We do not follow the typical pattern. I know, yeah, for most illustrators that is the case. It's sort of this wall that goes up between the two so that the editor can sort of shape the book the way that they are feeling it. But in our case, we have the Jennifer L. Holm versus Matthew Holm on the cover, but we don't have it listed as written by Jennifer and illustrated by Matthew because all of our work gets pretty muddy in the middle between when, you know, who's doing the writing and who's doing the drawing. So this was originally one of my harebrained ideas as to a general story idea and general character idea, and then Jenny helped flesh it out, and then she wrote the manuscript, and then I would rewrite, and we'd go back and forth, and then when I'm doing the artwork, she'll come up with ideas for layouts and suggestions of what the art should be. So we're pretty collaborative the whole way through, and we developed that relationship on the graphic novels, where it was really kind of essential, just because the graphic novels are just so many pages, there's so much work to do, that we had to divide up the labor between us a little bit more evenly. So I've always been doing the writing, and she's always been involved in the artwork. So.
And do you prefer it that way? Oh,
definitely. It's, you know, it's so, it's so much nicer to collaborate with someone on a project than to have it all be completely on your shoulders. It's so nice to have someone else, because you can be sitting there banging your head against the wall trying to come up with a solution to a story problem or an art problem or something. And, just a minute of conversation with another person who's working on the project with you, they can say, oh, well, why don't we do this? And you go, that's perfect. So, there's all these stories of these tortured novelists who are like, I don't know what to do. I have this writer's block. I'm stuck on this page. But if you have a collaborator to work with, two heads are definitely better than one.
Yeah, especially somebody that you trust and you've known most of your life, and that seems wonderful. Jennifer, as I'm speaking to you, it seems like you really loved and really embraced this evil princess. Is that the case? I hear a lot of times actors, they love playing the bad guy, or, professional wrestlers, they love being the heel. Did you feel some of that as you were writing The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight?
I think a little bit. I think it was funny because we did get, people were kind of freaked out by the word evil, but, I felt that it's kind of important that kids can see themselves and see that it's okay. That whole, mirror thing, you look in the mirror and you're like, I was a little evil today. I shouldn't have let my brother take the blame for something. Mm-hmm. And within our family, I was both the younger, sister and the older sister, because I'm the middle child. So I think I definitely had a little bit of the evil princess in me. I was a little bossy, I would say.
No comment.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Well, what about that, Jennifer? I mean, we're living in a time where there's a lot of, it seems like more and more words we can't use anymore.
I know. I find it very frustrating. And I think you're giving a little too much, it's getting a little out of hand, I think. So I think there are many different ways you can interpret words, and I think we're kind of reinterpreting evil as in the playful sense of the word. Mm-hmm. She's acting evil, mm-hmm. And she's being a bit of a pain, and so and I think. And
then, of course, the thing is, when you have any classic fantasy or fairy tale, you have, if you're going to have the hero who's, the brave knight in this case, you need to have some antagonist. You need to have the evil queen or whatever. In this case, she's still growing up, so she's just a little evil princess at this mm-hmm. point. Mm-hmm. And so they're each, they're playing their little role. And frankly, one of the points of the book is that neither one of them is very good at it. He's not always very brave, and she's not always all that evil. She tries, and then she doesn't necessarily succeed.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Jennifer, that one of the things that you mentioned is that, she's acting evil, and that's, I think that's something that we're losing some, we can't even identify behaviors sometimes. It's like, no, you can't say that. Yeah,
I could not agree more. Like, kids are losing the concept of play, right? They don't know how to play act anymore. Like, when we were kids, we would have put on elaborate plays and, make our basement into a faraway kingdom, or play outside, and you would just play act roles. And in a way, kids are being discouraged from even trying on those ideas when they're little, when they're, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's the time you should be using your imagination and be playful. Mm-hmm. And I wish we could get kids outside again and to embrace that. And, the reason I think when kids do this sort of thing the most is when they're bored, that's mm-hmm. when they start imagining things. It's like, go to your room, go outside and play, put your device down, mm-hmm. And just use your imagination.
Mm-hmm. That was also one of the great things in the book, was drawing kids being bored. That was such a huge part of our childhood, where you're like, there's nothing to do. Nothing to do. You're saying this, and there's 10,000 things you could be doing, of course, mm-hmm. until you finally, you spur yourself to coming up with some amazing imaginative play that you can do. And that's what these two eventually end up doing after they get sent to their rooms.
Yeah, imagine trying to be an illustrator without practicing your imagination as a kid. Imagine trying to be a writer without having that experience of imagining as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where you end up getting the best ideas. I mean, I feel like some of even when I was like a teenager, like, 16 years old and working at the Gap at the mall, just endlessly folding pairs of jeans and sweatsuits. That's where I developed my imagination on some level, because I was so bored I would just start dreaming about what I wanted to do and stories, and that's when you have your best ideas, not when you're sitting in front of a screen, and not when an adult is directing you necessarily. It's when you're just caught up by yourself, maybe in the shower or something.
So much fun. I just love this idea of encouraging kids to get outside, get into nature, to do something that hasn't been structured by an adult.
Yeah, and you know what? It's hard because I'm a parent to a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, and we're all the whole the freedom that we had as children is, of course, not the case today. But I do think those are the most. You're just like walking down the street, a little bored, and then you start talking to each other about an imaginary world or a word game.
Yeah. Well, what are you two talking about in terms? I know the Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight just came out, but there has to be some talk about the next project.
Yes, so in our Sunny series, it's our graphic novel series. The third book, Sunny Rolls the Dice, is coming out on October 1st. So we're really excited for that one to come out.
I'm really excited.
And I'm also, I think we can say I'm working on the next Evil Princess and Brave Knight adventure.
Yes.
So I'm doing some final artwork on that, and I assume they'll be announcing that soon. I don't actually know the date and when that's going to be appearing.
That's awesome. Matthew, one of the things I wanted to talk about and give you a chance to talk about it, and I one of the things that I readily admit here on the podcast is that I was very frustrated with my son when he was younger, and would oftentimes find myself going into his room and finding him reading a comic or reading a graphic novel, and very happy that he was reading something, but would always say to him, dude, could you just read a book that doesn't have a picture in it? You're 17 years old. And I didn't realize that reading graphic novels is reading, and that the stories are really complex. And can you just elaborate a little bit on that and the value of us encouraging our kids to read graphic novels if they're not into reading the classics? How just valid it is for them to be reading graphic novels.
Absolutely. I mean, so when we were growing up, our dad, who was a pediatrician and was kind of an older dad, he grew up through the Great Depression and into World War II. He was a huge fan of comics. He read Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon and Terry and the Pirates. And then, when we were kids, he would read Hagar the Horrible when we were all sitting around reading the Sunday comics and stuff. So he personally never saw any issue with people reading comics because he also was reading everything else too. He was, when he wasn't having to read medical journals to keep up with stuff, he was reading history and fiction, and our mom was reading, she was reading mystery novels. Jenny was reading fantasy books, and I would steal her books. My other brother had, all these books about the space program. So one of the great things that I experienced when I was growing up was we had just so many different types of books around. And so I would go through these phases where I would do nothing but read Peanuts comics, collections of them for weeks on end. And then I might burn out on that, and then I'd go read all about the space program for another 2 weeks or something. And then I would binge on the fantasy series that Jenny has in her bookshelf and read through 12 books in some series. And so you just cycle through, and getting back to comics in particular as a form of literature, the graphic novels especially can be really challenging. You're not just, on the one hand, they feel accessible because anyone can pick them up and make out a lot of what's going on just from the pictures. But there's also a lot that you have to sort of read from the pictures. Mm-hmm. A lot of adults make the mistake of just reading the text quickly, and then they're like, well, that's it, and now I'm done, and then they sort of put it away. I find, when I was a kid and now I find that most graphic novels you have to read several times as you're going through, and that's fine. It's sort of necessary. You go through and you might sort of be glancing at the pictures and reading the text, and then it helps sometimes to go back and look at it again and see, what did I miss in the images? What are they doing that the text isn't doing? How are they expanding the story or maybe contradicting what the text says in a clever way? And sometimes even on a single page, there can be, it can be almost like a movie where there's like a whole bunch of quick cuts going back and forth, and you're like, wow, that was sort of a confusing montage, but the director meant it to be that way. Mm-hmm. They meant it to be sort of this sensory thing that's happening to you, and you're just kind of picking it up and not completely aware. It's more of a feeling. And so you'll see some of those pages where there's a lot happening and it's all over the place and it seems chaotic, but that's supposed to be the sense, and you can go back and slowly piece it together and decode what's happening. So they can be really complicated sometimes and really rewarding once you work your way through the story.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about how much fun it would be, how much fun it would have been for me if I sat down and read some of those books and just imagining, the two different sets of eyes could be seeing two different things in a story at a particular time.
Right. Yeah, and it's no matter what age you grow up in, whatever the new type of media is the thing that everyone's afraid of, Mm-hmm. So when TV came out, everyone was afraid everyone would stop reading, and my favorite is that Thomas Jefferson once famously wrote to a friend of his who was asking about what he should be, having his daughter read to educate her properly. And he said she should never read novels because they rot the mind, basically. And that novels were terrible and they were the worst things in the world to read, because that was the new thing that people were reading then, and they didn't understand that they could be valuable as well. And now, of course, we hold novels as the highest form of literature that could possibly exist. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And I just have this memory, and I shared it with one of the authors, comic authors that was on the show. When I was a kid, the newspaper workers went on strike in Boston, and I think we had 4 or 5 newspapers at that time, and all the newspapers were shut down. And the only thing that, so none of the columnists were carried on TV, or none of the editorial writers, but the TV, the TV news always read the comics that we were missing. I had this memory of sitting and being with my parents and watching the newscaster, the serious newscaster, read Hagar the Horrible or Prince Valiant, and it was just...
That is great.
Awesome.
Now, Jennifer, I have to ask you, I love what Matt was sharing with us about, his, this voracious appetite he had for reading, would oftentimes go in and steal the fantasy novels that were on your shelf. Did he ever steal your diary?
It's funny. Everybody thinks writers are usually good diary keepers. I was a terrible diary keeper. I think I had a little diary with a lock on it. I probably had several. You kind of got them in your Christmas stocking. Uh-huh. And I only wrote in them, once or twice a year, usually when I was angry that I didn't get my way about something, like, life is so unfair. So yeah, he would have probably been pretty bored if he found my diary.
Well, Jen, before we go, so obviously being able to write in a diary is not a prerequisite for being a successful writer. But what advice would you share with a parent who has a kid who seems interested in writing? How can we best as parents support our kids' writing?
So I think the key to supporting writing and reading is to start small always, no matter the age, and keep it small. So small and accessible. So I have always kept books in my car, a basket of books by the kitchen table. So at breakfast, if people are too tired to talk, or even at dinner, I let them read a book. That's fine. And just have fun with telling stories. One thing that we do, and my kids love doing, especially if they want to ignore us, is we play a game called 3-Word Story. Wherever you are, you're stuck in line at the grocery store. One kid just says, "Once upon a time." The next kid has to continue a story using 3 words, and you can just play that for hours. Wherever you are, it's the most accessible writing game you'll have, and you actually have to start thinking about the words and funny twists and funny word choices. But you're starting with something so small that it's really manageable.
I wish I knew that. My family, my wife and I and my daughter were just down in Costa Rica, had a great time, but we were stuck in a traffic jam literally for 3 hours. And we would have had so much fun doing a 3-word story.
Yeah, it's a perfect, and you can kind of do with younger kids and older kids.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. Well, we're really excited that The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight is out. Where can folks connect with Jennifer Holm and Matthew Holm online?
So I'm at jenniferholm.com, or you can follow me at Jenny Holm, JenniHolm on Twitter.
And for me, I'm at matthewholm.net, and you can follow me at Matt Holm, MattHolm, on Twitter.
Awesome. We have been speaking to the brother and sister team that created The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight, Jennifer Holm and Matt Holm. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guests will be Kimberly Much and Colette Friedman. They're going to be talking about the reluctant fairy godmother. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, why don't you consider submitting your book for Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read status? We've assembled a team of evaluators, their parents, teachers, and kids, and if they feel that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read. And with that status comes all sorts of fantastic promotional tools that'll help you tell the world that your book is worthy of their consideration. It's really made a difference in so many authors' lives and in the lives of their books. Check it out today by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so much fun, Jennifer and Matthew Holm. Be sure to check out The Evil Princess versus the Brave Knight. I also want to thank my producer, Fatima Khan, for all that she does for the show. Be sure to check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me, and I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us on social media. If you haven't done so already, please do. It's facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. On Twitter, we are at Jedley Magic. And on Instagram, it's at Reading With Your Kids. I also want to thank you so very, very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading With Your Kids podcast.